I'm going to run down the questions. I think the goal today, just to kind of touch base with somebody that kind of has boots on the ground, get a little bit of info about what's happening in the breeding grounds. Everybody's kind of, like, is it good? Is it bad? You as a great source is somebody that can provide some insight for everybody that's out there. It's curious, whether you live in the Midwest, the Deep South, in California, or what's going on. So hopefully you can give us a little bit of insight and maybe give us some local knowledge and maybe even some Arctic knowledge, hopefully on the snows that we like to chase. But why don't you start off with an intro, like who you are, what you do, and yeah, what's going on?
So, I'm Chris Nicolai. I'm the research scientist for Delta Waterfowl. That's known as the Duck Hunters Organization. So, yeah, I just started this position back in January after 10 years working with the Fish and Wildlife Service.
This year is the first time in 65 years, and I want you to stop me and correct me if I'm wrong. First time in 65 years that U.S. Fish and Wildlife didn't conduct breeding ground surveys, and then that also applies for the Canadian side of things, the Canadian Wildlife Service, right?
Yeah, no, it's a mess with all the COVID stuff. Yeah, the Canadians were the first to back out. They immediately canceled all the Arctic goose stuff, and they immediately canceled the duck survey stuff, the stuff in May, and then they kind of left it on the table perhaps to do some duck banding later in the summer, but I think that's kind of fallen to the side as well. And then, Fish and Wildlife Service does surveys both in the States and in Canada, including Alaska as well, and that all got canceled. And as far as I know, not a single waterfowl survey has been conducted in Canada or the United States, with one exception, and that's the ground-based vehicle survey that North Dakota does for waterfowl, and they pulled that off. They did good. They got a lot of press release out on it. They made some changes, but they got it done. So it'll be interesting, if anyone takes the time to use that data to, inform at least something for the regulations we'll have, not this hunting season, but the one after that. This year's hunting regulations have been complete and set for months already. So,
are you guys at Delta still doing stuff, or like how has it impacted your research and just kind of getting out in the spring and looking around and what you guys are working on?
Yeah, so and keep in mind, our research is always focused to train, future waterfowl managers. So we're supporting work that graduate students do. So all our projects, and I was just looking, I think we got 18 projects going on this year. Yeah, we got a bunch of radio projects going on, ringnecks, mallards, green-winged teal, widgeon. They're going really good. And then we've got our nesting projects. We've got a big one going on up at Devil's Lake, where we're actually trying to estimate how many duck nests are out in fields, rather than what most people have done in the past is just go out and find as many as you can.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look at what proportion of them hatch, and we'll have a nest success study. I think I was up there last week. They're over 1,400 nests now, which is a lot, and they're only 2/3 of the way through their project.
So you guys have identified 1,400 nest locations, and then you have a team that's basically tracking them from incubation right now until they get to the water.
Yeah. So they got 24 quarter sections that they try to search all of those every 3 weeks. So right now they're in the middle of their third rotation. And then once they find them, then they monitor them for nest success. But yeah, we're doing that project's actually pretty cool. Trying to estimate how many duck nests there are hasn't been done that much. So you go out and it's like, okay, how many of them failed before the day we're here? So you got to be able to back calculate that. Then it's like, okay, you and I are driving these quads, side by side down a field with a chain between them.
Mm-hmm.
How often do both of us, we're looking at this field burning over here and we didn't see the duck nest at that moment. How many of those are we missing? Or like last week, I had my family up volunteering where we're driving a second chain behind the first chain.
To try
and
to
sure enough,
that second one, see if you got like a second trip or something out of it.
And sure enough, we're bumping the numbers up by 25%. I mean, it's like, really? I mean, we've always assumed in the past that first chain gets all of them. And, sure enough, especially these blue-winged teal.
But so what you're doing is you have you have two four-wheelers side by side. You have a chain, like a logging chain that you guys are dragging, right?
So we've got a lot of little chains hanging off it that are dingling and dangling while you're driving. But when you get going, it rides up on top of the grass. You know, when it's 180 feet long, going 5-8 miles an hour, it kind of floats up on top of that grass, and they just hear this dingling, dangling coming, and they hear the grass getting swept, and they get nervous as the chain goes over them. They go about, I don't know, a foot above the duck's head. So it's not like you're cutting them off at the legs or hitting them in the head or anything. It's just this disturbance. And
With the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and then the Canadian Wildlife Service not doing the surveys for 2020, how do you think that impacts us as duck hunters, both you and me and everybody else? Like, how do you think that impacts what our 2021 season looks like? Like, what's your kind of early read on what's going to happen there? Because this year sounds like it would have been a great year to have that data for.
it would have been and it wouldn't have been. I think for North Dakota, it was the 14th highest duck count ever recorded.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it was the highest ever recorded, that would cause some issues, right? You know, and we're hearing a lot of reports from Canada that it's pretty dry. You know, they haven't gotten much rain. We haven't gotten much rain. We finally got an inch at my house last night. My grass is completely brown at this point. We've been losing a lot of the temporary and seasonal wetlands that Canada sounds like they didn't even have them this year.
Yeah.
You just get north of the border and it's pretty dry. So it gets interesting. You know, we started about 4 years ago with what they call the SEIS project, a supplementary environmental impact statement, where instead of using the May survey from this year to set this fall's hunting regulations, they kicked the can down the road, where now they're using this year's conditions. They'll get the numbers out in the spring, and that next hunting season regulations will be set with that data. So we've got a year lag now,
Right.
which a lot of us are fine with. You know, there's a lot of us and a lot of our projects going on right now that are showing that these year-specific duck regulations don't really conserve birds all that much. So
Right. And so it just
it's
gives the managers more time. It gives the biologists more time to kind of look at the data, and then it just pushes it to the following year saying, okay, we're going to set it. Snows, Arctic birds, like, do you have anything for us? Anything you can kind of share what it's looking like up on the tundra and some of those nesting areas?
no, I mean, data information's really hard to get. You know, for a lot of us, it comes down to just personally knowing people in some of these villages that are closest to the colonies. You know, it's pretty rare that you have colonies, you know, right near a town. So, I mean,
Right.
you know, I mean,
Right.
something could be different when the colony's 80 miles that way. You know, the snow lasted longer. They got storms that where your living's at. So, yeah, this kind of that year, we're not really going to know a whole lot until
Even
birds
have a
start
little
moving.
bit, you got a little bit of info for us? Like, did you talk to anybody that have a little bit of an inkling about what we're looking at?
Yeah, a little bit, you know, and birds definitely took their time getting out of the prairies this year. Luckily, you know, some projects that originate down in Texas and Arkansas, and then also in California, have a lot of radioed geese going on right now. You know, there's all the new radios that have solar panels on them. They talk to cell phone towers. It's probably the most real-time data we've ever had. You know, it's like daily. We got people going out and looking at the fields that the locations showed the gooses at yesterday, you know, and they can go see, is it dry? Is it wet? How deep is it?
Sure.
You know, stuff like that. So they're really cool. And looking at those this year, you know, as the birds came up through South Dakota and North Dakota, in particular, the snow geese and the Ross, they played, you know, the back and forth game a lot this year. I think
Yep.
on average, those radios probably flew north over Highway 94 3 or 4 times this spring. You know, they'd come north,
Interesting.
they'd get shoved down south, they'd go down northern Nebraska, down into Mitchell, and then a week later, they'd be back north of Bismarck again, just to go back down to, you know, Huron or something the next week. And then once they got up to Canada, they sat up against that boreal for a little bit longer than normal this year. So it was, you know, a little bit of a delay for them to jump over that boreal. And then it sounds like it was a pretty late spring, or later than average spring on some of those areas. And,
Yep.
you know, I was able to hear from Ray Alasoskas, the most famous goose biologist out there right now. And yeah, he was here in, at least for Southampton Island, which is one of the three big mid-continent white goose colonies. You know, it was a late spring there this year. The snow hung around. There's some storms, and that's about it.
Can you give us a little bit of maybe backstory? Obviously, me and you kind of understand what that means, but what, you know, like a late snow means what? What does that really kind of entail for us looking at for fall?
Yep. So it's really neat with these mid-continent geese. You know, they get up against the boreal forest. You know, so it's low over around Winnipeg, starts running up diagonally until you're north of Saskatoon, and then runs pretty flat over past Edmonton and all that.
Sure.
But you take that line there and they get up against it, and that's where the farmland ends and where the boreal starts. And with all the radio data and hunt data and stories that we've known for years, you know, geese just don't use that boreal at all. They leap over it. And, you know, that's a 800, 1,500 mile stretch that they're hedging their bets. They have no information. You know, that's too far for them to go up and come back. So when they leave that prairie, they've got all their bags packed for making eggs that year. And they're just doing a leap of faith. And they get up there, and if things are early, that's phenomenal. You know, they'll land and boom, their hormones kick in. They ovulate, get all their eggs going right away. You know, and they can take advantage of that. You know, probably 6 days after they arrive in the Arctic, they're dropping eggs really quick.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, yeah, I never knew that. It was that quick, 6 days.
Yep. So that's really different in the Pacific Flyway. Their last spot before they make that final jump can be hundreds of miles. So the weather is really correlated. Oh, it's nice here. It must be nice there. Let's go.
Right.
You know, where that's not happening for these mid-continent birds. So when you get a bird that jumps over that boreal and all of a sudden they show up in Arctic Canada and it's way late, they've already got the eggs going with what we call rapid follicle growth. They've already given the thumbs up signal. There's yolk in them. They can slow it down or they can reabsorb them, but it's happening. And if they showed up and there's too much snow, there's nowhere to put them. So it can be a bust year.
So we think, I guess, you know, just kind of back to the question a little bit. So we think we're kind of in the middle ground. It was a little late, but it wasn't tragic, but it wasn't the best we'll ever see. So kind of maybe.
Yep. I think that's where we're at. You know, we're probably at a good solid average. And that's what it should be, right? You know, we can't always have the boom years, can't always have the bust, but we can have a lot of solid average years. So I'm guessing it's going to be similar to last year. You know, it's not the bust of the year before that, and it's not the crazy boom of the year before that, you know?
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, I think I would say the same. Like, you know, we want that average. We want the middle. We don't want, you know, like we've hunted those years that are just, you know, juvies everywhere, and we've hunted those years that are horrible. And I'll definitely take the middle versus the horrible. I mean, the good years are good to be a hunter too, but you know, we gotta kind of think about what the future looks like too on some of those really big years. So any insight on ducks?
You know, let's start out east, and things sound, you know, pretty good, solid average, maybe slightly better than average. Moisture is good. You move west, you know, you stay in the mid-continent, south of Canada. Things are really good. You know, eastern North Dakota, it's wet. I mean, there's wetlands that gain 6 foot of depth this spring from those snowstorms back in October. You know, we had a lot of corn that never got harvested that, you know, held a lot of snow in those fields, and, you know, people just got some of that corn off in the last couple of weeks.
Right. So I'm going to interrupt you. Speak of that, we'll have a video that we're hopefully going to get done here. We had a kind of a last second video in North Dakota from this spring that we had one of those cornfields. It was where they harvested it. I think we were there in maybe the middle of May, maybe the beginning of the middle of May. I don't quite remember off the top of my head, but they had just harvested it like 3 weeks before we got there, you know, and they had a lot of, you know, it shattered and, you know, a lot of stuff where the geese were in there. But yeah, it was like you said, it's setting up, at least in the Midwest here in Wisconsin, even in Minnesota, a lot of that water is full. There's kind of nowhere for it to go. So it's good news for us here in the middle. So
yeah, I helped find some really good fields. I think up in the same neck of the woods you guys are at. Yeah, it was a pretty good late season juvie hunt up here. I mean, I know some of the fields that I helped find, guys are shooting the last evening of the last day, you know?
Right, and that's exactly what we were. I think we left, and then the season closed. The guys we were with, they I think they wrapped it up, and they hunted the last day, which is pretty unusual. They'll usually take it to the last week, and then kind of get the stragglers. But yeah, they hunted the last day this year. So
Yep. Yeah, and then once you get up into Canada, things dry out quite a bit. It gets wetter as you go west, and like the coastal provinces, they're more mountain based. The water's a little more stable.
mhm.
But then you drop down into the west coast and it's pretty dry out there. I mean, I know February was the driest February ever recorded in like Nevada and California and stuff, and a lot of those western states, they're shooting their own mallards. So they got to make their ducks to be able to have a good year.
Okay. How about Canada geese? So like our local nesting giants, you guys got piles of them out there. Are they looking good, looking strong? They probably got probably like 2 pounders walking around with them already out there, right? Like
No, they're bigger than that.
little
Yeah, I
anymore.
mean, it'll be interesting to see what people get going. A lot of state agencies haven't canceled banding operations, so the goose stuff's ramping up. I know actually some places might be done already, like Nevada, for example, just so being there so long, it's more southern latitude. They wrapped up. I don't know. I don't think they did it this year. So, normally they'd banned earlier, but it's still early in COVID. A lot of other state agencies are probably getting ready to get at it right now. I'm still learning the schedules. Being a new guy here in North Dakota, but I know North Dakota's got a pretty large resident Canada goose banding program. So they're probably still a couple weeks out. I mean, I'm definitely seeing monster goslings with pretty black necks with a little bit of fuzz sticking off the ends of the black still. But then you're seeing some little guys, and we're seeing tons of them. Now, I would say the teenagers, the molt migrants, those big
Yep.
flocks that you usually see,
Yep, we see them.
the last week. I haven't seen them for about 2 weeks. It was early June that they were really ganging up.
I would agree the same thing. Like mid-June, big V'd-up flocks headed north. So it was early. Usually it seems like it's in July, and this year for us it seemed like they were out of there before before normal. So
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was interesting. We were out in the walleye fishing, still jigging with minnows, when the fish weren't all that active. And yeah, big groups of all them teenagers and non-breeders just heading on up to the hinterlands.
for sure. What can we do to kind of help out Delta at this time? Like what could we do to, where could we kind of help for you helping us? Like what's the best mode of donation to Delta Waterfowl right now, since some of these banquets and other things that you guys normally put on, what can we do to help?
Yeah, I mean, just think, how many dinners all of us nonprofits are not participating in, just because of meeting group sizes, stuff like that. So, we've done some online auctions, but, you can only pack so many people in on items, so you got to probably do multiple of those. And they've been a grand success for everybody. So, if people can afford it, because we know, everyone's in financial turmoil right now, investments aren't good. So like major donations have been suffering as well, let alone, the normal stuff from dinners. But if you got extra, some extra income that can be applied, I'd say just make some straight out donations to your nonprofits, and keep Delta in mind, because, we're doing a lot of this stuff that protects duck hunters, trying to keep this stuff going, keep projects going to justify good regulations, good conservation practices, and go from there. So, it's tough times. We'll see what happens over the next few months. No one can really predict. So
I guess what we're going to do here with this, I really appreciate the info. I appreciate you spending the time with me. It's always nice to catch up with you personally. Hopefully, not hopefully, I guess if Canada isn't open, I'm going to probably be knocking on your back door and seeing what you're doing this fall, if we don't make our annual pilgrimage up there.
No, for sure. I mean, we got, a lot of things going on at Delta. One, yeah, definitely look us up. Being able to meet with all these different groups and do these podcasts, or, Zooms or, however people use it and just help get the word out about Delta's projects is huge. We're doing all this research, training, the people that are going to have the wildlife jobs in another decade so that
Right.
they think about hunting and waterfowl. And then, we've got all these awesome university hunt programs. We're getting all these college students out and, we're getting them out on snow goose hunts that have, piles of decoys and all
Mhm.
the stuff we enjoy. And, we could talk about that. And yeah, a lot of neat programs, getting into some of the hen houses and the predator control and lots of fun topics that Delta's involved for keeping duck hunting going.
We could talk for hours, but we both I'm sure at some point here we both got to get back to work. But I'm gonna take you up on that because that kind of did sound a little bit like an offer about continuing the conversation here in the future. So
That would be fun,
yeah,
for sure. Keep me in mind. There's always some new topic we can roll up our sleeves into or do something more general as well.
cool. All right. Well, thanks, Chris. I very much appreciate it. And um, tell them geese that we're coming to get them this fall.
No, I hope there's going to be lots. It should be fun.
They will. They will. So, all right. Take care, buddy.
Okay, we'll talk to you another day.
All right. See ya. Bye.